And,
All right. Well, hi, everybody. I see we have some people on here with us, and thank you for joining us on our non-busy schedules. Thanks for taking the time. So today I have myself, Chris McClellan, those who don't know me, in case people here I don't know, Deb Della Posta, and we have Darren Naylor from Brockenchack. And Darren's kind of the guy who does everything in Brockenchack. He makes the wine, he helps sell the wine, he promotes the wine, he flies everywhere to see us and hangs out with us.
Picks the grapes.
Picks the grapes, he does everything. So tonight we're going to talk a little about Australian wine. We're going to talk about where his winery is, where it's located, and we're obviously going to drink some wine, which is what everybody wants to do, and that's why everybody's online here. So first of all, Darren is, if anybody can guess what time it is, what day it is in Australia, you might get a free bottle of wine. But anyway, also, if you have questions, any kind of question you guys have, it could be technical, it can be a fun question, whatever you want. We have questions here that we can, Darren and I and Deb can answer for you, but mainly they're for Darren or us as well. But we'll be watching for some of the questions, and we'll try to bring them up as we go along here.
Friday, 8 a.m.
So, yeah, someone said Friday, 8 a.m.
Spot on.
I think Rebecca's the winner.
Yeah.
So Darren's going to start drinking early today, which is not a bad problem. Most of us here do that. A lot of people on this list probably do the same thing. And Darren probably has shorts on, so we can't see his bottom half. Is that about right?
Nothing.
No. We're going into winter here, so.
That's how they do it in Australia. So Darren, a couple of things. I thought we'd just talk about a little bit of Australia quickly, kind of, where has the wine progressed from? Back in the 1800s, 1900s, and it used to be sweet wine country a lot, and then it kind of developed into more of a higher end kind of wine. So maybe give us a little history, a 5-minute history on some Australian territory and wine.
Yeah, sure thing. Welcome along, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Australian wine has a quite a long history. Simply the fact that it was all virtually started. A lot of persecuted Lutherans were sponsored to come out by a gentleman by the name of Angus William Fife, and being persecuted Lutherans from Prussia. And what they were allowed to bring was, their clothes, and they bought what they had planted in their yards and properties. They bought vines and olives and everything that grew well in their homeland, but they also planted it once they got to in Adelaide Hills and Barossa Valley and all those places, and it just grew so well. So table wine became a consumption for themselves, and then they realised how well they grew. The main growth for the Barossa was fortified wines to send back to the motherland of England. So basically, no production was created in Australia for commercial sale. It was all simply for the aristocrats. We're talking back 1850s, early even 1830s, things like that. So all the aristocrats back in England, we fortified the wine, put it in barrels, and then actually sent it back on boats to England. Then as wine evolved, people realised that it was a good table wine, and Cabernet used to be the most predominantly grown grape varietal in Australia. And again, the industry grew from the growth of the country itself, where Sydney and Melbourne became hubs of industrial and also economic growth. And people went to those, and they came out from England and they wanted to drink wine. And as we saw, it just grew and grew and grew. So the history of Australian wine really dates back to the early 1800s, and evolved from just fortified into table wine as we know it today.
Yeah, great. So I think a lot of people think sometimes Australia is yellowtail. That obviously helped put Australia in a map, but also kind of gave it a bad, kind of not a great image, but obviously the wine has accelerated since that point in time. But wow, they had a lot of sales for a period of time, but which made Australia recognized. But So yes, it helped, but also it hurt. But clearly Australia has gone much further, making less wine I've seen over time, but making better quality wine. Would you agree with that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. I think the understanding the export market, it's, again, like there's cities in America that has the whole population of Australia. So to be able to send wine to America and sell it well, you've got to make a lot of wine. I mean, most of our vineyards produce a maximum of maybe 3,000 dozen total. That's it. So, you know, you've got the bigger ones. So the guys like Yellowtail, they needed to produce a lot of wine to even touch the smallest parts of an American market. And that's why we all see the opportunities of selling wine into America. And the quality I think everyone's palate has developed. Like, I'm sure America's palate's developed. It's like looking at the Chinese their palates developed. So the need for quality wine, not bulk wine, is certainly there, and that's where we've established ourselves a little bit in the American market ourselves.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, a long time ago, sweet wine was everything. Sweet wine or wine that had residual sugar was everybody wanted, 60s, 70s, 80s. But now the palates have definitely refined. So a little about Brockenchack. So, I know you don't own it, but you're certainly a family member and do a lot of work there. Tell us about the owners and how they come up with the name. We think it's an interesting story that should be shared to everybody.
My mother and father-in-law own the vineyard. They purchased it back in 2005. And then basically from there, the thought was Trevor was in construction and did very well through, he was an estimator and a carpenter by trade, did very well through that, and thought of just always owning a vineyard. He actually owned the bottle shop, the liquor shop, in the main one in the Barossa called Tanunda Cellars. He's owned that for since 1999, and the opportunity to buy the vineyard came up, and Trevor thought, well, I'd love to live out on the vineyard, just grow grapes and retire gracefully. But anyone who gets to know my father-in-law, that's not the way he thinks. He thought he could do that, but he's turned us around into, we've got great grapes and great vines. Why don't we make our own wine? So before that, we were contracted to a very well-known company called Yalumba, and all our premium grapes of our Riesling and our Shiraz used to go on into their premium wine. So we were under contract. We just grew grapes, got so much dollars per ton, and there's a lot of vineyards in the Barossa or in any wine region that's just contract growers. Not everyone that owns a vineyard is a winemaker. They're just like cow farm. You have cows, make milk. Doesn't mean that you put the milk with your name on the shelf. You just make the milk and you pass it on. So, so Trevor did that. And in 2008, we were still under contract, but he held back one barrel of our premium wine, Jack Harrison, and found that we all drank it and went, wow, that's pretty good. And we thought, let's make our own wine. So one afternoon in the Adelaide airport, flight was delayed as usual. Marilyn, my mother-in-law, came up with the idea of, well, why don't we call it Brockenchack? And Trevor said, what would that mean? And she said, well, it's your 4 grandchildren. Bronte, Mackenzie, Charli, and Jack are the 4 grandkids. That's the symbol is the jigsaw puzzle, and that's the 4 grandkids coming together because they're the life and soul of the vineyard. And having each child having a part of that vineyard is Trevor and Marilyn's dream.
Great. Yeah, I love that story. I think that's a pretty intriguing story how they come up with that name, and she came up with that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So obviously here in the States, here in this hemisphere, the buds on the vines are starting to burst and open up, but yet where you are, you're opposite. So What are you guys doing right now?
Basically just sitting back, and we've just going through the cleaning process. Vintage is just finished. We virtually picked our last grapes, which was the Cabernet, probably about 4 weeks ago. Cabernet is always the last picked, and your Chardonnays are always basically first picked. We're Eden Valley, so we're a cooler climate region. So we're just outside the Barossa. So we encompass the Barossa, but there's the Barossa Valley sits at 200 metres. We sit at 480. So we're three weeks behind the Barossa Valley in vintage. But we're all basically going through the process now of cleaning all the bins, cleaning everything up. Everything's been, virtually all the wine has actually been made. It's all gone through malolactic fermentation, and everything's sitting in either in barrel or still in tank. Our core range of Riesling, Rosé, and Pinot Grigio, they are all getting bottled in probably 4 days, 4 or 5 days. So
great.
What we're doing now is just waiting. We've got a lot of real cold snap has just come through. Rain's hit, so you don't prune during rain. But the next process that we have to do is get stuck into pruning, which I generally make sure I'm traveling and doing this sort of stuff because I hate pruning, so I don't like being down there.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be easy. I think it'd be hard.
It's cold, it's rainy, and it's wet, and it's not a nice job, but it's a job that has to be done.
So you're leading to my next question, which would be, Australia is known to be a very hot climate, very hot area. Yet in southeastern Australia, this is where I encourage people to break out their maps. You can see where we're talking about. But you're in the southeast Australia, Barossa zone, Barossa area. What's the climate like there? What's it similar to maybe in this hemisphere? I mean, you got a lot of sunshine. Yet it's very cool at night. How would you compare it to somewhere maybe in the U.S. or France or somewhere like that?
Just we're basically along the same demographics and sort of get the same terroir as your Tuscany, places like that. Okay. I think probably just for those in America, probably just a bit higher up than Arizona. Arizona's got that real dry heat all the time, and that's what we have down in the Barossa. We've got the really cold. We get all our rain. Basically, you can generally count on it every day. We have a special day called Anzac Day where we commemorate World War I and World War II. Any war veterans, it's our big Australia and New Zealand Army Corps Day where we have a special day where it's a public holiday. And so on that Anzac Day is virtually the first day we get our rain in the Barossa every time. And then we get rain all the way through winter. Dams fill up. The vines are dormant. So the vines are just basically soaking it. The soil's soaking up all that rain and all that nutrients from the nitrogen and everything. And then basically when we start heading into your September, that's when budding occurs for us. But yeah, it just gets cold, wet, rainy. Vines are dormant. The hills are all beautiful and green. The grass is green, but the vines are all grey and brown. And all right.
Oh wow!
Sorry.
Song for you.
Yeah. Do you get? Is frost a threat for you at all?
Sorry.
Is frost a threat?
Yes. Yes, massively. That's the worst thing that can, apart from fires in the middle of summer, frost in the just in those early. You're either getting it more so in spring is when frost really hits, because you get those really cold pockets. And what frost does, it actually burns your vines. As you guys know, your vines can survive in snow all the way up to the canopy if it had to. But frost is what burns the vines and burns the budding off, and that happens. We only get frost in spring. To counteract that, we have fans and sprinkler systems to counteract that. But yeah, frost is because you lose your crop for two years if you get hit by frost.
Yeah. So the other thing I was going to lead into, this is a nice segue. You've been making it pretty easy for me, but we're going to talk about the fires, how they affected you or maybe not have affected. And I also know that you have a lot of a netting on some of your vineyards and vines because of birds and et cetera. So tell us about some of those things that can affect the crop.
Yeah, well, fires, as you guys know, Australia, virtually all of Australia was on fire during January, February, over that period. We were very lucky in Eden Valley that we weren't affected at all. Nor we are northeast of the capital of South Australia called Adelaide. Adelaide Hills is southeast, and they're about an hour away from us, and they were badly affected. So once fire goes through your vineyard, some of the vineyards were totally burnt out, and that's it. It's sort of game over. It's scorched earth. You're not going to replant and restart. It's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of time. And even if your vines aren't burnt or affected, the smoke taint that goes through, you lose your crop for that year and probably the year after. It's a bit, the smoke taint's a bit like frost. You 2 years where you can still make the wine, but it's got that really smoky charcoal nose on it, and it's just not pleasant. So, sorry, Chris, what was the other question regarding
netting?
Netting,
on
yes.
the vines.
Yeah, well, like I said, Barossa sits, we're 10 minutes out of the Barossa. So we're Eden Valley. Barossa Valley sits at 200. Barossa Valley is the true valley where it's just all vineyards and there's not many trees. Whereas Eden Valley, we've got a lot of trees. The more trees you have, the more birds you have. So there's a small bird called a blue jay that will come in right before vintage, and if they get a hold of your maturing grapes, then they'll eat through, and they won't eat it all, but they'll certainly take a dint out of it. Like we let our sheep and cattle and even kangaroos, they all adjust through the vineyard. They don't want to touch the grapes, which is great, but these birds, they can really go through. So we've tried gas guns, we've tried a drone. It's actually a hawk-looking drone that you put it on a pattern and flies certain areas over you, and it actually has a screech to scare away the birds. They've just got used to it, and netting's the only thing that you can use to prevent it.
So scarecrows don't work anymore.
No, scarecrows birds are too smart. They've evolved.
I remember when I visited in 2012, everything was covered with nets. So I do remember.
And that just adds to the, you've got to put the nets on. We get little whirlywinds that come through, and we'll pick your nets up and take them and dump them 2 kilometers somewhere else. So that's another problem with its farming. It's another problem. Then you've got to actually, before it takes, if you're picking the Riesling crop at such and such time, we always pick our whites at like 3 o'clock in the morning, which is the coolest part of the morning. Always pick your whites at the dead cool of the day. You've got to be up. If you're picking at 3, well, you've got to be up at 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning, because you've got to get the nets off first, and then the contract pickers come through, because all our vines, virtually still 70% of our vineyards still hand-picked.
Great. So obviously when people think about Australia, they think about, typically one grape. They think about Shiraz. That's what they usually think about. So that's why tonight we try to veer off on that path, because Australia has so much more to offer, especially where Brockenchack's located, which is within the Barossa zone, which is right next to Barossa. But Eden has much higher elevation, which allows you to then have other grapes that perform wonderful. Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, which I personally love the Chardonnay. So that's why we wanted to kind of showcase those wines tonight. Shiraz is always the big dog, but Australia is becoming, especially in the sommelier world, a lot of pockets for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, which are so food friendly. So tell us about your, did you start with Shiraz, that was the grape that was grown, and then you kind of went to other grapes, or how did they all evolve on Brockenchack?
Basically, we've got 100 acres in total of the vineyard, but only about 43 acres of vine now under vine. Before that, there was about 38. There was 20 acres of Shiraz and 18 acres of Riesling. The Riesling was planted back in 1896, and the Shiraz was planted in sort of 1920. So they're very, very old vines. Riesling was, and I believe is coming back. It's Eden Valley is known. Eden Valley and Clare Valley are known for their Rieslings. But then Trevor, being the mind of Trevor, he loves Chardonnay and he loves Pinot himself. And basically he said, I want to plant Chardonnay and Pinot. And our winemaker at the time, Sean Koleski, who's a 6th generation Brossarian, loves Pinot as well, and thought there's an opportunity there. We can plant Pinot in Eden Valley. Now it's not known for Pinot Noir, Eden Valley. It's Cabernet and Shiraz, cool climate Cabernet, cool climate Shiraz. But no one ever thought we had enough elevation and enough water. Water is a real key factor. You need to have a lot of water for Pinot. I call Pinot Noir my mother-in-law wine. It's it's one of those. It's one of those wines that it's fussy. It needs this. It doesn't want too much sunlight. It wants a bit of sunlight. It wants a lot of water. It doesn't want too much water. It's got to be this type of water. It's got to be gentle. It's got to be hand-picked. It's got to be nurtured and loved and caressed. But when you finally get it right, it's the most beautiful thing in the world, as my mother-in-law is too. So
it's like my wife.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's it.
Make sure she didn't hear me.
Yeah.
So we have a couple questions here. So I was going to ask you.
We're going to go into Charli. Jaye, we should.
Right. Yeah. So
start drinking that.
Yeah. So before we start drinking the wine, someone had a question about what do you think are your biggest challenges in today's industry? You think it's how you make the wine? Is it how you distribute it? Is it the farming? What do you think, if you had to pick one that's a real pain in the butt for you or a challenge for you, what do you think, what would that be?
Oh, it's getting your brand. It's about establishing your brand as a niche in the market. It's the market's saturated, and there's a lot of good wine out there, and just having just good wine is not enough anymore. You've got to be able to stand by your wine and know how good it is, and promote it and present it, and have that little point of difference where people are going. I honestly believe people don't just buy wine for the taste of wine. They buy wine to be connected with A, the winery, or B, with the person selling the wine. If you're honest and you're truthful and you back up what you're doing and everything like that, that's where people want that. They want a connection. It's like when you go to your local coffee shop and you walk up and the guy goes, Darren, I got your flat white ready for you, and I know you don't like sugar, but you like a dollop of cream in it. That's what you want. And that's what you want out of a winery. You want them to know, okay, yep, I'm keen as on Chardonnay and Pinot, but look, your Shiraz, you're going to have to push me on it. And you go, well, I reckon you'll like this style. Or and people want that connection. And that's what I find is getting myself out there and getting connected with people is probably the hardest thing.
Oh, great. Yeah. So thank you for that. That's why we obviously we love your winery, not only for the wines, but your family and you guys are so personable. And this is why we're sharing this tonight, so people can who have met you. Can meet you. So I guess we can start drinking the wine. So I thought we would start with our Chardonnay, your Chardonnay, the Charli Jaye Chardonnay. So those of you who haven't poured yet, which I can't believe would be anybody hasn't poured yet.
Drinking already.
Yeah. So Chardonnay, I kind of like, I'm Chardonnay fan. I like it, and sometimes, again, it gets, when things are ubiquitous and it's everywhere in the market, sometimes people make bad things and sometimes can get a bad connotation, but Chardonnay is, to us, it's a wonderful grape. And it's considered kind of the winemaker's grape. It's a kind of a neutral grape in general, but you can shape it the way you kind of want it to be. And I thought maybe you could, in your own words, describe, there's Chablis, we have California Cabernet, we have French Chardonnay, or California Chardonnay, Australian Chardonnay. How did you guys come up with maybe where you want Chardonnay to live? You can be very angular and tart and very acidic, and also be very, very, very fat and alcoholic and buttery and oaky. How does a winemaker decide where they want to live? Is it based upon the climate they're in? Is it based upon their own personal taste? Maybe a combination.
Yeah, great question. It really comes down to one, when you plant, when you go, oh, I'm going to put Chardonnay in. Now, do you plant the vines yourself, or do you graft on top of old existing vines? And guys, remember, if you're going to graft it, simply, I can chop off some Shiraz, graft on top Chardonnay, and then the rootstocks there is Shiraz, yes, but it's what you graft on top takes over. So basically, I can have an existing Chardonnay plant within probably 18 to 24 months if I graft on top. That's how quickly that can happen, and the rootstock takes over. The big thing is we didn't do that. We planted all clones. Trevor had a pretty good context in his head what he wanted, and everyone sort of expected Trevor to want that big buttery style big buttery style Chardonnay, but what he was looking for was a more citrusy, more creamier notes and a lot more elegance, and because he thinks that would interpret Eden Valley's altitude and climate more better. So your terroir, your soil, the soil, the wind directions, the sunlight, the exposure to rain, everything, all those factors come into play when putting new plantings in. So basically, we looked for what we call Mendoza clones, and basically sourced those through nurseries, and we did the plantings using Mendoza clones. That in itself helps with what we're chasing in the flavour and the texture of the wine. We wanted refined phenolics, and we wanted elegance and a beautiful soft finish. So again, it all comes down to the oak that you use. We only use French oak, and we use a particular one-year-old French oak and a brand new French oak. And what we do is we virtually have, we make so little amount of Chardonnay because we did the plantings ourselves. Basically, we have we blend the two barrels together after 5 months, and then they sit together. So everything goes in, it all goes in on lees, and everything blends in together, and we get those melon notes and that white peach. But what we're looking for is Chardonnay is a food wine, and it's all about the finish. So if the finish is refined and elegant, and you've got those tendencies, those phenolics, it'll sit there, it'll adapt well, and start going with those creamy pastas and your fish and your white meats and stuff like that. So that's sort of, we had the vision in our head what we wanted, and farming's farming. Each year you're going to get a different not a different style, but you're going to get a little bit different characteristics, but generally the style is what we chase, and that's what we stay the same.
Great. Yeah.
So when you say you blend the two barrels together, what are they sitting in then after that? Is it the new oak or the old oak?
No, it's
stainless.
No. It sits in a 1-year-old oak.
1 year old.
So yeah, it goes back to basically 1-year-old oak after that, because we don't want the tannins. We want it to be able to bottle it and then drink it quicker. So if we left it in brand new French oak for 20 months, basically we wouldn't be able to release it for probably 3 or 4 years, because the tannin would just be the oak would overpower all the fruit because it was new oak. That's simply why you're putting your new oak and your old oak together, because basically it doesn't the oak doesn't overpower the fruit, so that when we release it, so we're currently on 217, and already that's 3 years old. You guys are on 217, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. 215 was our first vintage, and I think we made 1 barrel out of that. And then we just, as the vines are getting older, each vine's getting stronger, creating a few more bigger yield, bigger production. So getting up to 217 now, but it's one of those wines that just develops. It can last in the bottle for 10, 12 years.
So I think just to educate some of our viewers, some people get confused on oak means butter, etc. So we try to tell people that a lot of oak is more, especially French oak, some baking spices, vanilla, those kind of things. Whereas the butter comes from a whole different process, and not to kind of overwhelm everybody with educational things, but that's a whole different kind of topic. That malolactic, that fermentation that you guys can actually design what it wants to be, and how much of that softer character, some of that little bit of butter character follows through, which I kind of like in the end, a little softer, longer finish. But that's something you can control. Maybe tell us about how much you guys do, and does it vary year to year? Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, basically, like I said, we'll pick these grapes at 3 o'clock in the morning, and to know whether they're ready to pick, like our winemaker will go through the vineyard and actually taste each section of each row of the grapes, and they'll be able to pick up the bomade. Bomade is the sugar level inside the grape. They're that good, they can pick up the bomade, the sugar level within inside, just testing it in their mouth. Then they go, right, these rows are ready, these are good, we're picking in 2 days. They will send off the grapes to a scientific lab and get the analysis done and get everything understanding what your residual sugar is going to be, your pH and your tartaric acid and all those sorts of things. And then that confirms that they're right to pick. Simply what we're looking for, we'll always end up with the amount of oak treatment we do give the wine, we will end up with it going into those buttery notes. But at the moment, the creamy notes are there, and it's more fruit driven because of the oak that we use and the amount of time that we put it in oak. And it all comes down to little factors at the beginning of the, do we have 80% de-stemmed or whole bunch, and then are we cold soaking, or are we malolactic, letting it go? Cold soaking is just simply keeping it, the grapes colder. When you put it all together and they start to ferment, you cold soak it so that it slows down that fermentation process. And you do that with your Chardonnays, your Pinot Noir, because you don't want, the more heat you get, the more sugar you get, the more sugar, the more alcohol. So you got to try and refine that and keep that in a process that's going to let the wine mature and let the processes happen, but not at an accelerated rate. So you're trying to really control it, control the controllables, is what we say in the winery. Yeah.
So how about this question? So everyone's drinking the Chardonnay. It's hand picked. It's got love and care. What makes you decide to hand pick one variety versus another? Some are hand picked at Brockenchack, some aren't, and same with all other wineries around the world. What makes you decide to hand pick versus not hand pick?
Okay, simply so if you're machine picked, I think Deb, you've seen a picture of that.
I'm gonna try to bring up a picture.
Big Bird, we call him.
You
Big
want
Bird,
the one?
nice big yellow machine. Oh, either one, it's all good. Yeah, that's virtually picking our white wines. That's picking the Pinot Grigio, and we at machine picked. So what that does, it just goes over the top of the vines and gives it a really violent shake. So as you can see by the picture, it's shaking the grapes, it's dumping it off a conveyor belt into the back of a bin which the buggy drives next door. All that is all about you're roughening up the grape. The grape itself, it needs, if you want a delicate, intricate wine, you've got to handle it delicately. So that's why we handpicked our Chardonnay, because when the hand pickers are going through, they're clipping them off, putting them into buckets. The buckets are then tipped over and stuff like that. With a machine picked, it's a lot more quicker, versus to the hand picked. So basically, and you don't miss anything. You know, we don't have enough Chardonnay to leave anything on the vine. So we're trying to get as much as we can, because we make so little amount of this wine, and the vines aren't, there's not that much out there. We want to make sure, and these guys, the contract pickers, are amazing. They do not miss anything. So that hand picked, it's like when we're in the ferment tank, you know, we're not pumping over, we're actually shoveling it over. So it's not as rough on the grapes.
Yeah. Let me grab that picture real quick.
Yeah, no, you won't see that picture because I don't do that stuff.
No, I have a picture. There we go. I have a picture
there we go.
Of the shoveling. Yeah.
Yep.
That's in the tank. And that looks like Pinot, right? Or is it Shiraz?
Oh, I couldn't really tell right there. I would say, I'd have to have a look close. You can tell the Shiraz grape's a lot bigger. Pinot Noir's a lot smaller grape.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to see it in that.
I'd say that by the look of the colour of
it says Pinot. You know what, Megan? She's awesome. She says Pinot Noir. Yep, being pressed.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm like you. I like to drink it, study it, sell it, but making it, that wouldn't be for me. And it's not my bones now.
I'd like to come work. I want to come work a harvest, but I don't know about if I have. I don't think I have the patience to.
I would try it out. That'd be done then. I'd say, all right, I checked the box, you know. So when you drink this, tell us some of the notes you pick up when you drink the Chardonnay. Kind of run through the fruit character, the types of fruit, the acid level. In other words, how much makes your mouth water, and then the finish of it. Tell us what you would when you assess this. What do you think?
Especially with this Chardonnay here, we had a really cool sort of spring, and then we had light rain. So budding came very late. So basically that had a lot to do with the aromatics that are going to come out in the wine itself when you have a later budding and everything. So it's a more accelerated sort of process with the grape growing. The aromas I get straight away are like, you know, beautiful, just melon. Melon and citrus are hitting my nose straight away. And that's all from French oak that develops those sort of nose characteristics. And then straight away on the taste, I'm getting white peach. It's just dominant. There's a little bit of, and this is where wine is fantastic. Now, last time I tried this wine, I got green apple. A lot of green apple was in there. Now that's changed to it's gone real citrusy. So wine develops, especially white wine, Riesling, Chardonnays, they can hit a peak, and then they will dull off and they'll drop away, and they'll get a bit, they'll change the characteristics. They won't be as crisp, a little bit flabby, and then they come back out the other side, and that's when they widen out on your palate and really develop those phenolics in the mid palate and open up, and they really start to sing then. So again, this is where people will try a bottle and then they'll try another bottle and go, and everyone's palate's different. There's no right or wrong in wine making or in wine drinking. It's a very famous wine maker and what would I call her? She's a Baroness of the Barossa, and she's just a fantastic lady called Jane Ferrari. Her motto is, it's yum or it's yuck.
Yeah, we have a friend like that. It's either I can't say it, but you know, there's some explicit words in there, but it's either like the wine, don't like the wine.
That's it. So residual sugar is about, you know, it's under a gram of residual sugar. It's about, we try to keep it about 0.7 to 0.9 of residual sugar. Your pH is sitting around 3%, and what in your tartaric acids, it always between 5 and 7. It's I'll have a look. I don't know the actual exact ones, but I'd say that's sitting around 6, because it does have that acid balance, and that's what you want with Chardonnay. You've got to have the fruit and the oak integrating so that everything balances. One doesn't have to fight the other, and one's not overpowering the other. And when they talk about a structured wine, you want that wine to develop. It goes from that front to middle to mid back palate, and it just sings all the way through. And that's when you've got your fruit at the front integrating with the oak at the back, and it just meets in the middle and makes everyone happy.
Yeah, I think it's like a middle of the road wine for me, between that really acidic Chablis type green apple tart versus the big California Chardonnay. This is kind of right in the middle of that. For me, yellow apple, the lemon meringue, the lemon curd, those kind of things, just right with that acid still preserved, just helps that balance. It's not empty at the end. It's not an empty jelly donut in the middle.
Yeah, and last year we sold out of the 2016 vintage in probably 30 days. And so we were very excited to get this in. And I can tell you the way that the best description that I've heard is it just has a kiss of that French vanilla flavor. It's not overpowering, but it's something, I see a lot of people like to put that in their coffee, or, they love that flavor. And this just has that kiss of it that is just carries right through and makes it delicious.
It's actually getting better as I drink it, because being 8 o'clock, I'd brush my teeth at 7:30.
Yeah, take the day off. You're right. You're off today.
I'm getting rid of the toothpaste.
So let's move on to the Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
Pour a glass if you haven't already. Some people on here I know probably already drank their bottle.
I haven't had any yet.
I won't call them out though, but so a couple of things about this wine. Obviously, again, I consider these to be super great when they're in a cool climate region. So Pinot Noir would fit great in any cool climate region. But what's different about this bottle, if everyone can see it, that there's not a name on here. There's not a grandchild name that I see, and it's called Hare Hunter, which I know Darren's going to tell us why in the world it's called Hare Hunter. This is a great story to kind of lead into our Pinot Noir for tonight.
Yeah. So the Pinot, as I explained before, needs to have that cool climate. So we've planted this at the highest, most elevated part of our vineyard. So we go up to about 490 meters above sea level. So we're planting this at 480, 485 meters above sea level, right up the very back of the property. And simply the fact we called it Hare Hunter, when we did the planting and everything, there was you get rabbits in Australia, but you also get hares, and the hares are just the bigger, stronger, faster rabbits. And this hare found itself, it dominated the Pinot Noir patch, and they can get in and they burrow down around the roots, and they're not great for the vines, but they're not too harmful. So Trevor employed his 2 grandsons, Mac and Jack, and just to let everyone know, Jack's in his 2nd year of winemaking down on the vineyard, so he's going through that process. He's the boys were, I think, 9 when they were sitting around having smoko morning tea, because I've said that before in America, and people think that 9-year-olds are smoking. Having morning tea.
They're probably wearing thongs.
Yeah, they were wearing thongs. Yeah, and basically, Trevor overheard Mac and Jack talking when they were having morning tea, and then Mac said, "Listen, Jack, you make sure you become the winemaker and you make all the wine." He said, "And I'll travel the world like my dad, and I'll sell the wine." So from a very young age, the boys had it all worked out what jobs they were going to be doing in the vineyard. So Trevor employed them both to go up and shoot this, and they're both pretty good shots. They've grown up with numerous weeks and holidays on the vineyard, so motorbikes and lighting fires and shooting guns are all part and parcel for these young boys, and that's life on a farm. So that Trevor said, you need to go and get rid of that Hare. It's annoying me, because he taunt Trevor. And 2016 was our first vintage of Hare Hunter, and the Hare was 1 and the boys 0. So for a whole vintage, he eluded them. And then more hares started to show up. So Trevor basically we ended up getting 1 or 2 of them, but there's still quite a number of hares still taunting Trevor as he drives through the Pinot Noir patch. And that's why we called it the old Hare Hunter.
Cool. I think that story's, I love that story. I thought, and I could have had too much Pinot Noir that night, but I thought it was named because they finally shot the hare, and therefore became, all right, hey, you guys shot it. We're going to call it Hare Hunter Pinot Noir. But that may have been at midnight when you told me the story. So,
no, they eventually got him, but yeah.
So about the Pinot, is it hand-picked as well, the Pinot Noir?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Pinot, as everyone knows, it's Pinot Noir. To make a great Pinot, you need a lot of. It's considered a pathway to becoming a great winemaker, because you need so much experience, time, patience, everything about Pinot Noir like that. So we handpick this. We basically do it all along the lines of the way it's been done back in Burgundy and all those, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So it's done along destemmed and whole bunch, cold soak again, oak time. We're giving it 10 months in French oak, so it's not overly oaked, but it has the thing with our Pinot Noir is we are from Eden Valley. We don't hide that we're from Eden Valley, which is predominantly known for Shiraz and Cabernet. So there is a lot more fruit on the front palate, not so much your dryness, or we don't get those mushroom sort of truffle notes yet through our Pinot Noir, but you're still getting those cherries and those dark raspberries and stuff like that coming through. So
for our viewers, so for red grapes, you can they're handpicked, they're on the bunch. You put them up there. Do you stem them? Do you throw the whole thing in? Is it a mix? You may have said it earlier, but
yep,
how do you guys like to do yours? It's a mix.
Most of the time, we between 80 and 90% are destemmed,
okay,
and 10 to 20% a whole bunch. So that stem and the seed and everything, that again, little amount creates more tannin. Right. So that's all. That all adds to the tannin structure that you get from that. So that's why, you might have a Shiraz that whole bunch. When you hear that term, whole bunch, basically they want their oak isn't as good, so they want the stem and the seed and everything to help with that tannin structure. So Pinot Noir, you're not looking for those big, structured, heavy tannins. You want refined and elegant tannins, again, like your Chardonnay. So a little bit of destemmed and stuff like that. We culture, it's all everything we do is all cultured yeast, not wild ferment. And yeah, 14 days on skins to get that really dark, rich color. And for Pinot, if everyone can agree, that Pinot, you've got some really dark notes on it. Now, I've seen Pinots, they're wafer thin and really thin and watery. I believe people do want, if you're going to have rabbit pie or hare pie and a Pinot, you need something that's going to, it's a gamey meat, and deer and venison and all those they're gamey meats, and Pinot has to adapt well with it. It's got to have a bit of structure with it. So that's why we do it through that process.
Yeah. And do you think the whole stem, when you have everything, does it give you any kind of a character on the nose at all? Do you think it's distinctive from completely just berries versus the whole stem? Do you think anything on the nose it provides for people? Different character at all?
Oh, I would say the stemming and the whole bunch, that's all, that doesn't give any characteristics. It's all about the grape itself. It's all about the skin. It's the stemming and the destemming, the whole bunch. That's all about tannin structure. And the texture on the back, not so much your characteristics of your nose and your palate.
Okay. When you drink this wine, I think there's some savory notes a little bit, not terrible, but I think it's for being. I think the elevation gives you that, and the terroir gives you that. So I think it's those savory notes. To me, it's almost. I feel like sometimes the Pinot Noir is like, it smells like Oregon. Sometimes smells like a little bit of Burgundy, but yet it's ripe, and it's got a lot more booze than most places have. Do you think that's just from how much sunshine is there? I mean, you kind of get the element of everything there, which is great.
Yeah, it's probably sitting at about, I'll take a guess, 13%, 14%.
Yeah,
14% alcohol.
Yeah, yours
so
is
it's
pretty big wine.
Yeah, that's big for a Pinot Noir. Whereas normally you're looking at most Pinots from France, or I'm not sure with American ones, like you said, up in Russian River, around there. I know there's good Chardonnay and good Pinot Noir, and they sit around 11 and 12%. But they get that real coldness. It's all about, we get exposed to so much more heat. I mean, like I said, guys, middle of summer, between January and February, we'll get to 30, 32, 33 degrees during the day. What's that? That's about 110 Fahrenheit, I think.
You know what? I have no idea. High. I need my calculator.
So, well, I know 100 Fahrenheit's hot. So let's say if we're 30, you guys are 100. But the difference with Eden Valley with us, we have a 20-degree variance. At night, we might be 32 degrees during the day. We'll drop to 12 degrees at night.
Wow.
So therefore, and that's what makes our wine so much more softer, more elegant, and a lot more aromatic. Because what happens is, in true valleys, Barossa Valley, they'll get to 34 degrees, but the heat gets trapped in there, so they'll only drop to, say, 26 degrees at night. We drop 20 degrees. They'll drop maybe 5 or 6 degrees. Their grapes keep ripening because the heat's creating that ripening. Right. Whereas we're dropping 20, our vines go dormant overnight. So therefore the process is slowed down. So therefore the grape's got time to do its work. It comes out more elegant and more structured. It's a slower process. So therefore it's a more refined process.
Yeah, I think that Pinot Noir needs that. It needs that some heat to develop the flavors, but at night it needs to rest. Otherwise, it becomes a overinflated, jammy wine. I think everyone's the same way. Myself, I mean, I'm not super tan individual, so I like the sunshine. But you know what? I love my air conditioning at night, so I get it. So somebody had asked about, Pinot Noir, is it robust? Is not. I would consider this more of a robust Pinot Noir. The alcohol is there, yet it's got structure to it. I think it's a big Pinot. Would you agree?
Yeah.
I don't think it's
for sure.
I don't think it's a soft, wimpy Pinot Noir. I think it's a pretty big Pinot Noir. It's got a lot to offer.
What's your favorite? I have another question here. What's your favorite meal with this Pinot Noir?
Oh, well, normally, to be honest, when I drink the Pinot, it's the sort of the wine I drink before I have a meal and I have a lamb roast and have my Shiraz.
It's your aperitif.
Exactly. It's the precursor to what's going to happen next.
Cheese and charcuterie.
Generally, I generally, if I'm doing a Pinot, which it's myself and my wife's wedding anniversary today. We're 21 years, so we will be opening up because the cool weather just came in. We're going to have a little fire pit. We will open a Pinot because my wife certainly not a big drinker, and definitely doesn't like Shiraz or Cabernet. Too big, too bold. Pinot she likes. We'll do a grazing plate where we'll have just lots of cheeses, meats. That's why I think Pinot Noirs along those lines. Your olives and your certain salamis and cured meats. That's I think where Pinot Noir comes right into its own element, where you've got all those soft cheeses, hard cheeses, and it blends in between. I would say what I have done before is I've been to our local butcher shop, and he's done a duck and venison sausage, and I do the sausages up, cut them up, bit of balsamic glaze, and you dip the sausage into the balsamic glaze and a glass of Pinot.
Wow.
That absolutely kills it.
That does sound
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, I wish Dawn was here with us because, you know, she's our resident chef. And
Yes.
I know she loves this with salmon and also pork dishes. So for everybody listening and wondering what to drink this with, this is her go-to salmon wine.
Yeah.
Great.
Venison's great. Duck, don't be scared to.
And Hare.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Hare. We just don't have those here.
We don't, yeah. Rabbit.
Hey, Darren, so, kind of wrapping things up here, what do you,
Any other
please ask us some questions if anybody has any out there so we can ask Darren some questions here. But how are things shaping up for the 2020, for the vintage?
Yeah. Look, so 2000, there's a bit of a two-pronged effect here, guys. So 2019, leading into budding, we had a lot of really high cyclonic winds. Now, what that did, when we talk about budding, we talk about bud burst and stuff like that, pollination. The cyclonic winds really stuffed everything up in 2019. So we saw the yields in 2019 go right down. Some parts of the Barossa was down 40%. We were down probably about 20%. And that, again, unfortunately with farming, everyone, they just wrote it in some book that it's a two-year effect. So we knew that 2020, our yield was going to be down again because of that cyclonic winds that happened. It was like, 50 knot, 40, 50 knot winds for 4 or 5 days. It just completely, it's one of the vines didn't get blown over. So with that, we knew 220 we were going to be down again, and we've had a massive drought. Like the one thing we've been very fortunate on our vineyard, we've always had a lot of water because we've got very large dams, and Trevor spent a lot of money on desalination. So we've got a lot of bore water. Guys, bore water comes, as you might know, comes out of the ground, but it's too salty, too acidic. We have to desalinate it, break down that salt out of that water, and then we can pump it onto the vines. So to pump the bore water straight onto the vines will actually take in that characteristic of that salt. So that, we have to desalinate. So Trevor spent over $100,000 just on the desalination plant, and therefore he could pump water. But now with the Australian government, what they do, they go, yes, it's bore water, it's under the ground, but you're only allowed to take so much. And the same as water from the creeks and the rivers. Okay, this is your allocation. You're only allowed to take so much. And then, so once that all dries up, she's all over. So if you don't have water, you don't have yield. If you've got a two-prong effect. So this year, we're about 50% down. We are in, it's going to be a cracking vintage because the complexity and the intensity of the grapes are going to be massive there. But the yields are right down. So we're luckily we've had 2 bumper crops of 2017, 2018, and mind you, get onto when we release 218 in America, get on it. It is going to be, from all accounts, people are touting it as it's a vintage of the century. Get in early, stock your cellars up because it is going to be a cracker. And we've got good quantities of that. But 2020, we are across the board, we're 50% down easily.
Wow.
We have one last question before we run out of time. What about pairing?
Okay.
What about food pairing with the Chardonnay?
Just pick your favorite.
Sydney rock oysters.
Oh,
Ooh,
nice.
right, yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
lemon,
thank you so much.
Lemon oyster.
Yeah, perfect.
We are at our time limit, and
Yep.
we thank you so
Okay.
much. Thank everybody that attended, and certainly would love to hear your feedback, and hopefully we'll be able to do more of these. So
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed
Yeah.
it thoroughly, guys. Great to see you all.
Thanks,
for
Darren.
tuning
Hey,
in.
thanks for today. Enjoy and happy anniversary.
happy, yeah.
Enjoy.
Till Susan, happy
Yeah.
anniversary.
Yeah.
All right. See ya.
Will do.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Take it easy.